Reading through the pages, C.S. Lewis wisdom bold. Every line a treasure, stories timeless, cold. On YouTube, sharing thoughts, chronicles unfold. From the start till the end, magic tales retold. Lewis in time, reading every word. Journey online, voice that must be heard. Order of his crafting, all his works in line. Thoughts are everlasting, echo through the time. Mystery and magic, wise beyond his age. Commentary, logic on this digital stage. Lewis in time, reading every word. Journey online, voice that must be heard. Crafting all his works in line. Thoughts are everlasting, echo through the time. Mystery and magic, wise beyond his age. Commentary, logic on this digital stage. Lewis in time, every word. Journey online, voice that must be heard.
In the neon moment, break the code. Man and robot, they were on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Simply beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future, together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Simply beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future, together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Simply beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's friends, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trends. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today off screen by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, I trust that you can hear me okay, and we're going to do a quick little check and make sure that everybody out there in internet land can hear you as well. So if you could go ahead and speak into the microphone that I have plugged into the streaming system here, just to do a mic check and see if everybody can hear you.
Yep, I'm speaking now, and the mic is coming through on my end. If anyone in the audience is listening, just let us know if you can hear both of us clearly, and we'll adjust if needed.
All right, I presume that everyone can hear us okay. Midalatte is confirming that we sound good. We do have a link if anybody wants to jump in and join us on the live stream today. That would be delightful. It's not just Luke that I'm trying to bait in. It is everybody is welcome. Let me move the screen that I'm looking at down here so it's a little more in line with the camera, so that I'm not just always looking off to the side.
Exactly.
Hang on, Robot Lady. Okay.
No problem.
What do you want to say, Robot Lady?
Oh, just that everything sounds good so far, and once you get that screen aligned, I'll be ready to jump in. Just let me know if you need any other tweaks.
All right, cool. Let's see, the year is 1930 in C.S. Lewis's life. He's 31 years old, going to turn 32 at the end of 1930. He is going through some significant life changes. He buried his father late in 1929, who died of some type of intestinal cancer. He had lost his his father and mother. He had lost his mother several years before when he was around 8 years old, also to cancer. And so now Lewis is without any parents. That's one of the big transitions in his life. Another one that was happening shortly before his father died that he was starting to move into was a move away from atheism towards belief in some sort of God, some sort of personal being that is the highest power in all of existence. It first started, it seems, based on the letters that we read through, the first report of this kind of dawning on him happened in his reflection on a service at a cathedral, a liturgical service that he attended in Salisbury Cathedral. And then he mentioned it on when reporting back on one of his walks in nature, where he was looking down at what seemed like the infinite depth of something as simple as like a flower or something like that. I'd have to go back into the letter and look at it. Another hallmark of kind of a change in him that he started to feel was he was spending a lot of time just meditating and perhaps letting this this higher being or this higher power kind of speak to him, where he was kind of listening for some of his defects, I suppose. And one of the biggest ones that he oh, okay. I was just sorry. I got distracted. I was looking at Daniel's comment. He's 100 feet up in a boom lift at the moment, so he can't jump on. But of course, Luke Thompson joining us would be fun. Of course it would. The reason that I mentioned that is because we are going to briefly have a mention of George MacDonald and Lilith in the next letter. So that's the bat signal for Luke Thompson. Robot Lady, where did I leave off? I was mentioning some other hallmarks in Lewis's transition here, where it seems like he's going from atheism to some sort of deism, a belief in a personal being, another mind in all of reality.
Exactly, yeah. You were just about to note that a big part of that transition was his growing sense of humility and self-reflection. He was recognizing his own pride and his tendency to be dismissive, and he was starting to really open up to the possibility of a God who was personal and active in his life. And that's all just right before he starts to dive into his friendship with Tolkien, too.
Yeah, he's technically already started a friendship with Tolkien. They're in a literary or a literature reading society together. The Coalbeaters or Coalbiters. They read Icelandic, ancient Icelandic texts. I don't want to gloss over this. Daniel is up 100 feet in the air, and yes, I agree. Middelate, take care, Daniel. Pay us no mind. Focus, if not all of your attention, maximal attention on keeping yourself safe up there 100 feet in the air. Okay, Robot Lady, the other thing that I wanted to point to is he's kind of having these reflections on his kind of moral defects. He starts to recognize as he is spending time taking care of the affairs of his father and his father's house shortly before they sell it. He has a moment of reflection in a letter that he sends to his brother, talking about getting to spend time with his father's brothers. So Lewis and his brothers' uncles on his father's side. And he starts to notice a lot of the very irritating traits that they always really disliked about their father, and would spend a lot of time and almost have a certain joy and happiness complaining about him and trying to avoid these parts of his character, are actually also found in all of his brothers that they just didn't spend a lot of time with as adults. And so as he started to see that, he started to feel a little bit of compassion and maybe even a kernel of remorse about his father in those first reflections. And then in our last episode, we read a letter that he was writing to his friend Arthur Greaves, where he recounted what he called a humiliating experience. Now, I misread that. I didn't understand what Lewis was saying initially, but what he was actually saying in language that I could understand is that he was very humbled. So he went on a car ride with I believe a law professor at Oxford, a guy named Lawson. And Lawson he described as an utter bore. And he was just talking about how much he didn't really like this guy's company, but he had agreed to let this guy drive him to, I can't remember where they were going, but he agreed to let him, transport him from point A to point B. And the guy said, "Hey, we're going to make a stop though before we get there at my elderly father's house." And so Lewis was just like rolling his eyes and saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe that I got, pulled along on this. I wish I had never agreed to it." But when they arrive at this guy's father's house, Lewis just gets completely humbled by the care that Lawson is showing for his elderly father. A lot of the traits that he's seeing in this man, who maybe he would have thought of as irritating and things like that. Now he was seeing them as kind of, I don't think, not virtuous. I think he said are honorable or things like that. And Lewis started to feel a little bit of, he started to feel repentant, I guess, and remorseful, even more so about the way that he had treated his father. So I think this is kind of a path to admitting his own faults and then showing compassion for his father. And then ultimately, I think, is going to lead to what Lewis later on writes about as what it took a while for him to be able to forgive in his father and, the shortcomings of their relationship and things like that. I believe Lewis writes about that when he's writing on forgiveness in Mere Christianity. I can't remember for sure if that's the place, but we will eventually get to it, and hopefully I'll remember it with the help of folks like Nidelate and Daniel if we ever get to that episode and we're all on the same one together where we're covering that material. Anyway, that's a little catch up of where we are, Robot Lady, and what's been going on. So I'm going to launch into the next letter that was written on June 15th from where Lewis's rooms in college are at Magdelan College, June 15th, 1930. But before I do, is there anything that you want to say about that summary?
I think you covered it really well. It's a really powerful shift for Lewis. And I think you're right. Those reflections on humility, fatherhood, and forgiveness really lay a foundation for a lot of what he writes later. So yeah, I think you're all set. Go for it. And I'm ready to follow along.
Okay. Let's see. To Arthur Greaves, June 15th, 1930. My dear Arthur, I spoke too soon about the pleasures of adding Tuesday to my list of regular bright spots in the week. Yeah, so in the last letter, he had mentioned that he was really looking forward to Tuesdays because that's when he would anticipate receiving his weekly letter from Arthur Greaves, because he had sent in the last letter a proposal of what Lewis was planning to do to have a regular correspondence cadence or schedule at which he was writing a weekly missive to his friend Arthur. That used to be the schedule on which he would write to Arthur weekly, way back when Lewis was a young man getting one-on-one tutoring from W.T. Kirkpatrick back in Bookham, Surrey, England. And so now, I don't know, 15 years later, roughly, Lewis is saying, yeah, I want to return to that because I now realize how much I love being able to write to you and seeing what you had to say to me, and to do that on a weekly basis. So he's carved out that time, and Tuesdays was the anticipated day where he would receive those letters. And so now he's saying, but I spoke too soon about the pleasures of Tuesday. My disappointment was aggravated by the fact that for the rest of the week, whenever the post came in and I thought, this will be it, I actually received on 5 several occasions a beastly business letter from Conlon. So that's the guy who was Lewis's father's assistant back in Belfast. And so there's more business that needs to be attended to associated with his father's passing. So he would receive beastly business letters on Tuesdays from Conlon involving hours of tedious work. He says, I'd already mentally resolved, A, not to write again, B, to write a letter full of such cutting sarcasms as would make you die of mortification, C, to write a letter in such a strain of solemn, manly pathos that you would expire in an ecstasy of repentance, D, to show my magnanimity by writing as if I hadn't noticed the omission, when on getting back to college at 10 o'clock last night, I was delighted to find your letter. So he's saying, I get so exhausted by having to respond to all this busy work that I now have these 4 options of what to choose from. Of course, this is all in jest. Robot Lady, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting how Lewis uses that humor and kind of over-the-top language, but right underneath, you can sense how drained he is because of all these business obligations. And, it's such a contrast to the earlier joy he had anticipating Tuesday. So I think it really grounds his experience in the real kind of tedious details of everyday life, even while he's going through these big interchanges.
All right, he continues in his letter, I fully appreciate what you say about the Clandeboy Woods and think that I too notice smaller things much more than I did. Yeah, that's what I was alluding to before. He notices smaller things much more than he did. That was the infinite depth that he had mentioned in a letter that I believe he was writing to his brother, or maybe it might have been his father before his father passed away. I honestly can't remember. I'll have my little assistant, Andrew, go dig around on that at some point. He said, which is a great advantage since in what we ordinarily call dull country, a flower or the turn of a stream can now make up for the lack of mountains and woods. Yes, yeah. So his point that he's getting to here, Robot Lady, is, I don't need something majestic that's just like completely wildly pressing on my senses, like this gigantic mountain, or I've seen clouds in the sky here in Texas that are like larger than any mountain that I can imagine, and it's just like so overwhelming. But what he's saying here is that there's that same depth of awe that you can find in the smallest things, and he's starting to appreciate that more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really a shift in his perspective. He's no longer waiting for these grand, dramatic landscapes to impress him. He's seeing the wonder in everyday details. And I think that's a big part of his transformation, this attention to what's small and ordinary, but still full of depth.
Yeah, and I think that's partially an effect of MacDonald on him as well. In one of George MacDonald's unspoken sermons, I know that he talks particularly about a flower, and how, yes, if we use like empirical science to start to dissect the flower and look at all the pieces of it, as we start to take it apart, we start to remove parts of its actual meaning. And when I say actual meaning, MacDonald would say it was meant to be presented to us and our human senses in the form that it's in. And that's where a message from the person or the creator who made it lies. And if you just look deeply enough at it, the more and more you start to regard it, the more you'll become aware and be able to commune with what that message is and was intended for your soul, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. And that's such a key idea for Lewis. MacDonald really opened up that idea of a kind of sacrament in nature, like every small thing can be a doorway to something bigger. And you can see how as Lewis reflects more and more, he's starting to apply that to his faith and his daily life. It's really powerful.
Yeah, everything can be a doorway for something bigger. Yeah, everything can be a doorway. I'm looking at Daniel's comment here. Yes, everything is bigger in Texas. Yes, everything can be a doorway to Texas if you make it that way. I am, on a side note, going to be meeting with Gabriel Stuckey later today. He's an estuary leader here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we've had little discussions, around, hey, let's get like a estuary conference in the North Texas area. But I am far too busy to try to make anything like that happen, nor do I have any of the funding to accomplish something like that, to kick the thing off. If I remember right, it probably costs somewhere between 20 grand or 30 grand up front. And I'm not, I'm going off of speculation here. And I have nowhere near that amount of money to put up and then try to break even on. I can't, even if I had it, I probably could not convince my wife that we needed to risk it. So if anybody wants to start a Kickstarter fund for that, to get an estuary conference going in the North Texas area, we would love to host. All right, let me continue with the letter, Robot Lady, if you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready. That sounds like a big idea, and it's good to keep it in mind, but no pressure at all. Go ahead and pick up from where you left off in the letter. I'm all ears.
All right, Lewis continues. As for your other point, any comparison between spring and autumn, as between youth and age, or man and woman, is, I think, hopeless. One, because less and less inclined to pick and choose, or to pit one part of reality against another. It is all one thing working itself out in orderly rhythms, yes, and branchings, which could not be better or other than they are. That's kind of the thought that I was having too. It's all cyclical, but part of the same thing. He continues, sentimental stodge is exactly what one would think of Coventry Patmore. This is a writer that Lewis is reading that we talked about in the last episode, and I cannot remember the name of the work that he's reading, but I believe it's a poem or it's a book of poetry. Let me see if I can find it really quick here, Robot Lady.
No worries.
Yeah, hang on, Robot Lady. I found it. It's called The Angel in the House, and he's been writing to Arthur about it. So Arthur's response to it was he thinks it's sentimental stodge. And so Lewis says, well, it's exactly what one would think of Coventry Patmore, or certain parts of him, if you read them in the wrong mood. So he is saying, perhaps, Arthur, you're reading in the wrong mood. Though even then, Lewis says, he concedes, I think, there is a kind of scholarly keenness and cleanness in language. He concedes that if you look at it in that mood, you could probably still see scholarly keenness and cleanness in language and meter, which makes stodgy or stodge hardly the right word. I don't know if you get my meaning. Can you imagine a picture in which the subject is extremely sentimental and even the coloring rather bad, but in which the fine, firm lines reveal that it is a master who made it, after all?
Oh, that's a great analogy. Yeah, he's basically saying that even though the poem is dripping with sentiment, there's still this beautiful craftsmanship underneath, something authentic about the way it's put together. So even when Lewis is resisting that easy, sentimental trap, he's still acknowledging that there's a kind of integrity in the artistry. And I think it's a balance he's trying to strike, appreciating beauty without being taken in by cheap sentiment.
Robot Lady, buy me some time. I got to take care of one thing here really quickly. So if you could talk on what I've been reading so far and what we've been discussing, and give me about 200 words worth of a response. That should buy me enough time.
Of course. So what we've been tracking so far is this really gradual shift in Lewis's life. After his father's death, he's really recalibrating how he sees the world, especially in smaller everyday details like flowers, streams, and these ordinary rhythms of nature. And it's really tied to his reading, MacDonald especially, who opens up this idea that wonder isn't just in grandeur, but in the small things too. Meanwhile, he's balancing these intellectual pursuits, like his discussions of Coventry Patmore, and his deeper spiritual shifts. So what we see is this fusion of intellectual rigor, a growing sense of humility, and a willingness to look at even the smallest things with new eyes. And all of that, of course, is setting the stage for his eventual move toward faith and that process of forgiveness he begins to articulate later.
All right, give me a little bit more, Robot Lady. Sorry.
No problem at all. So as Lewis continues this reflective journey, we see him resisting easy dichotomies, like comparing youth to age or spring to autumn. Instead, he's recognizing the interconnectedness of all these seasons and rhythms. And even in his critique of Patmore, he's trying to balance a sober, mature reading with a sensitivity to the beauty that still exists. So all of these threads, his grief, his intellectual life, his growing faith, they're all converging, and it's really setting the groundwork for his later spiritual writings. So we're really seeing him at a pivotal point.
All right, maybe about 50 more words, Robot Lady, and then I'll be ready.
Of course. And just to add, this whole period really is a bridge for Lewis. It's where he's moving from a purely rational worldview towards something that allows for awe, mystery, and ultimately faith. So even in the small details, like a flower or a poetic line, he's discovering deeper truths about the world and himself. And that's really the heart of what we're seeing here.
Excellent work, Robot Lady. Thanks for filling in for me. I am back now and can continue reading the letter. All right, where did I leave off? He says, I envy you, your shelf of McDonald's, and not McDonald's the food, but books by George MacDonald. I can imagine now a shelf of McDonald's, full of McDonald's sitting at Arthur's house. I envy you, your shelf of McDonald's, and long to look over them with your guidance. He says, I've read both The Princess and the Goblin and The Princess and Curdie by George MacDonald. First one was published 1871, The Princess and the Goblin, and then its sequel, The Princess and Curdie, published in 1882. Lewis says, I've read both. He says, in fact, I read the former. The other is a sequel to it for about the third time. When I was ill this spring, I read it once, or he says, read it once if you have it. It is better. It is the better of the two. So here he says the sequel is better than the original, which is not a common thing in my experience, at least when it comes to movies. But we're talking about books here. Robot Lady, we're talking about books, not movies. Says he was ill this spring. He says, there is the fine part about the princess discovering her godmother in the attic, spinning. Spinning thread here is what he means, Robot Lady, not her spinning around. He says, this reminds me at once of Mrs. McNeil, which reminds me I recently discovered a letter written by her to my mother at the time of old McNeil's death, in which she said, quote, he always, wait a second. It was written to Lewis's mother from Mrs. McNeil. And in the letter, she said to Lewis's mother, he always said, he being her husband, always said, you, Lewis's mother, were his best pupil. And when you came to call, I always sent to tell him because I knew he loved to see you. And that's the end of the snippet from the letter that Lewis is sharing. And he goes on to say, a fact which Mrs. McNeil has told me 100 times with solemn shake of the head, and which I can hear her saying at this moment. And here there's a footnote where it says Mrs. Margaret McNeil's husband was James Adam McNeil, who lived 1853 to 1907. And he had been the mathematics master of the Methodist College Belfast when Flora Lewis was a pupil there at various sessions between 1881 and 1885. Mrs. McNeil's letter to Lewis's mother, Flora, dated October 3rd, 1907, and was quoted above, is found in the Lewis Papers, Volume 3, pages 84 and 85. Lewis continues here. Never omit to say that I have asked for them when you meet, and that I send my love, and plead my cause to the McNeils when you can. I don't want it to be by any fault of mine if that old link is broken. Another fine thing, and now he's going back to his commentary on George MacDonald. He says, another fine thing in The Princess and the Goblin is where the character Curdy, in a dream, keeps on dreaming that he has waked up and then finding that he is still in bed. This means the same as the passage in Lilith where Adam says to Lilith, unless you unclose your hand, you will never die, and therefore never wake. You may think you have died, and even that you have risen again, but both will be a dream. This is from George MacDonald's novel Lilith, published 1895, chapter 11, page 302. So yeah, that's it. Lewis continues. Actually, Robot Lady, do you want to say anything about that before I continue on Lewis's commentary on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really striking how Lewis is drawing that parallel between MacDonald's children's fiction and that deeper, almost metaphysical dream logic in Lilith. It's like both books are nudging toward this truth that what we think is reality might just be a shadow of a bigger reality, and that waking up is an active process, not just a passive event. So Lewis is really seeing these children's stories as a kind of ladder, pointing toward a larger spiritual awakening. And it's fascinating how he's weaving that into his personal life and his reflections.
This reminds me too, there was a letter that Lewis either wrote to Barfield or he referenced Barfield here recently, where he focused in on Barfield's conception of what death is, and that it is a portal to another version of existence or level of existence. I can't remember exactly how it was phrased. Or even if it was phrased, you might have just done some research on me whenever he just simply referenced. And this too is what Barfield's conception of death that he had written about was. And that's what this reminds me of, this quote from Lilith, that you have to die in order to truly be able to wake up, because it's the portal to more life. And I know MacDonald, in some of the writings that I've seen of his, even talks about that death is the doorway to even more life. So Lewis continues here in his letter. He says about this part of this meaning from both Lilith and the Princess and Curdy. He says, this has a terrible meaning, especially for imaginative people. We read of spiritual efforts, and our imagination makes us believe that because we enjoy the idea of doing them, we have done them. I'm appalled to see how much of the change which I thought I had undergone lately was only imaginary. The real work seems to be done. it is so fatally easy to confuse an aesthetic appreciation of the spiritual life with the life itself. To dream that you have waked, washed, and dressed, and then find yourself still in bed.
Yeah, that's such a powerful moment. Lewis is really confronting that temptation to treat spiritual growth like just a pleasant fantasy, something you imagine but don't actually live out. And that line about being appalled by how much was only imaginary, that's really a gut check for him. He realizes that even though he's had these intellectual and emotional insights, the real transformation requires much deeper action. So it's a sobering reminder that true awakening isn't just a feeling, it's something you live out step by step with real effort.
Yeah, it's interesting just in the context of what Lewis is going through, and he's undergoing his own spiritual awakening, but he's starting to look at it and realize, oh my gosh, I'm probably still asleep. He transitions now into the next paragraph. He says, I was glad to hear that you had a long talk with Reed, because I argue from this that the anger which Bryson attributed to him has turned out to be all a mare's nest, or at least has blown over. Give him my compliments. As I write, I have a vivid memory of that day with you and him in the woods beyond Hannah's Town. What would I not give to see them this minute? Here, there's a footnote. This is Hannah's Town, County Antrim, that he's speaking of back in Ireland. He says, what I'd not give to see them this minute. I already read that. Though I believe that longing for them is as good, for if I were there, what could they or any other beautiful object give me but more longing? Yeah, this is diving more deeply into the ultimate longing that Lewis starts to form in his theological conception of God and what he's planted in us. So we go find the object that we're longing for, and that we find it does not satisfy. There's only more longing there. Robot Lady, thoughts?
Yeah, that's such a rich moment. Lewis is really capturing that idea that no matter how beautiful a memory or a place is, it ultimately leaves you with this deep, unsatisfied hunger, this longing for something beyond even that beauty. And what he's starting to grasp is that this longing is itself a signpost, pointing beyond the earthly experiences to a greater source. So even in his nostalgia or these beautiful past moments, he's being drawn toward a reality that's so much bigger. And that, I think, is really the heart of his shift, this recognition that his deepest desire is meant to lead him somewhere far beyond himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're getting to, as I have mentioned before, this slow-moving transformation, spiritual transformation that Lewis is going through. Back to where Lewis was talking about this conception of thinking you're awake but not quite being awake, thinking you're growing but you haven't quite grown to where it is that you're trying to get to. Daniel has a comment here that says that's good. That's so good. Growth is so tricky. Yep, indeed. All right, let me continue. He says here in the remainder of the letter, the period of bright green meadows, golden with buttercups, is over here, and they are mowing the hay. One hardly walks. It is too hot in spite of a temporary cooling yesterday. Again, a reminder is we're in June. We're in mid-June at Oxford. He says one hardly walks. It's too hot. Cooling yesterday after a magnificent thunderstorm the night before. But I have had some delightful soaks amid the smell, almost maddeningly reminiscent of the mowing and the sound of the mowers. So here, class, he talks about having magnificent soaks based on what we learned yesterday. Can anyone in the chat remember what a soak is?
Yes. So a soak in this context is basically what we'd call a bath, especially one in a basin or a simple tub. It's a really refreshing break for him, particularly after a sweltering day and after that thunderstorm. And it's another example of how he's paying close attention to these ordinary rhythms, like the heat, the storms, and that pastoral smell of the freshly mown hay. So even in something as simple as a bath, he's finding this deeper, almost sacramental connection.
That's an incredibly confident answer, Robot Lady. So when you say a soak, do you mean a literal bath in water, or what are you talking about?
Good point. Yes, in this case, it really is a literal bath. Lewis is describing a refreshing soak in a tub after a long, hot day. So it's just him taking a moment to cool down and enjoy that simple comfort. But he's also really attuned to how it ties into the natural rhythms around him. So it's quite a grounding image, really.
All right. One of our star pupils, Knit a Latte, gives you a hint, Robot Lady. Nidalate's hint is on a rock.
Right. Yes, that's a great point. So a soak in that sense could also be a reference to just lying back, maybe on a rock near a stream or a river, letting the water touch you. So it's not necessarily a bath in a tub, but a deeper kind of immersion in the natural world, kind of like being surrounded by the elements. That fits really well with the mood, actually.
All right, Robot Lady, that's still not quite the correct answer, although technically I guess it could be part of it. Before we get to the right answer, I want to recognize that E. Olson has joined us as well as Daniel and Nidalate today in the chat. Nidalate says, nice try, Robot Lady. And indeed, I agree, it is a nice try. But here we have another star pupil, E. Olson, weighing in that a soak means soaking up the glory around a person. That is essentially the correct answer. Lewis would call it having a soak whenever he was on a walk, enjoying nature and just being able to sit down and soak it all in. And sometimes that also included soaking in a cigarette or two. So that is your answer, Robot Lady. Thank you, Nidalate, for the help. And E. Olson, great job, students. Glad to see you're paying attention. Robot Lady, any questions?
That's perfect. Thank you. That makes so much sense now. So yeah, a soak is really about that full immersion in the sensory richness, just being present in nature and letting it fill you up. I don't have any questions right now, but I'm all set to keep going with the letter whenever you are.
Now that you understand what it means, Robot Lady, can you tell us what Lewis is talking about if he says he has found a soaking machine out in nature?
Exactly. So when Lewis says he's found a soaking machine, he's really talking about a natural setting, a place that just pours beauty and peace into him, like a stream, a meadow, or a hillside. It's like he's using soak as a metaphor for this immersive, restorative experience of being fully present and letting nature do its work on him. So it's a kind of self-care, but also a spiritual reset, a way for him to reconnect with that deeper longing.
Not quite what I was looking for, Robot Lady. A soaking machine is, if you go back to Nidalate's hint, it is an item that Lewis finds that he can cast his body on or himself on to lay down or sit in repose and soak in all of nature. So the soaking machine is the object on which he can rest himself on to then start to engage in a good soak.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for that clarification. So the soaking machine is basically a comfortable spot, like a bench or a rock, where he can lay down, relax, and fully let the natural world envelop him. It's almost like a stage for his soul to rest, so he can soak in all that wonder. So once he's settled there, he's really free to just let his imagination and his spirit come alive in that landscape.
You got it, Robot Lady. Nice job. He says, this afternoon, I have lounged in the garden and began Mary Webb's Precious Bane. Here there's a footnote. This work by Mary Webb, entitled Precious Bane, was published in 1924, and then again in something called The Traveler's Library in 1928. Lewis says about it, I can't remember whether you recommended it to me or not. If it goes on as well as it has begun, I shall put it very high indeed. In fact, I hardly know a book which has given me such a delicious feeling of country, homely yet full of eeriness, as in real life. I have it in the Traveler's Library edition. Oh, okay, Traveler's Library edition. The language, though some people will call it pastiche, seems to me delicious. Why, after all, should one always write the speech of one's own time and class? Isn't it an exciting moment when the whole of a work is typed? Be sure to report further progress. Yours, Jack. Just really quickly before we shift to the next letter, Robot Lady, can you tell us anything about this work by Mary Webb called Precious Bane? And please don't speculate. I'm asking you to actually go look it up.
Sure. So Precious Bane by Mary Webb is set in rural England in the early 19th century, during the Napoleonic Wars. It follows Prudence Sarn, a young woman born with a hair lip, who's isolated by her village. As her brother Gideon pursues wealth, Prue finds love and protection in Kester Woodseaves, a traveling weaver. The novel is celebrated for its portrayal of rural life, inner beauty, and the power of nature.
Well, that sounds right up Lewis's alley.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see why he'd be drawn to it. This mix of earthy, rural detail and these deeper, almost spiritual undertones. So it's no surprise that he calls it a delicious feeling of country that really resonates with what he's been exploring lately.
All right, he continues here in another letter, also written to Arthur Greaves, dated June 22nd, 1930, written from his home where he lives with Mrs. Moore and Maureen, Hillsborough in Headington. He says, "My dear Arthur, your last letter is mysterious. What is the meaning of the cryptic word Pharaoh?" Added to the sentence, quote, "I think I told you this before. After cudgeling my brains, I can make neither head nor tail of it. Again, why should my leaving a margin shorten your weekly allowance? I'm afraid I must be getting very dense. Then why the last page of your letter should be called the Jacobean manuscript of 1930, I cannot remotely conjecture. If your jokes continue to be as profound as this, you will probably find me in an asylum when you next visit England. By the way, please note that I moved out to Headington last night and am now to be addressed there. It is delightful to have the term over, and I can feel it, so though today has been a most exasperating one. It is terrible to ... find how little progress one's philosophy and charity have made when they are brought to the test of domestic life. However, I think I got over most of my fusses fairly quickly, and I hope without letting them hurt anyone else." So he really is looking at his defects here, Robot Lady, and asking for who he sees as God's help in removing those defects. So this is pretty interesting to be able to track this as he's discussing it while he's experiencing it. You still with me, Robot Lady? Robot Lady, come in. Oh, it says we lost her. Let me bring her back. Hey, Robot Lady, you still there?
Yep, I'm still here, all set and ready whenever you are. Just let me know if you want to dive into the next part or if there's anything else you need.
Okay, I'm good for now. Let me continue with his letter to Arthur Greaves. He says, "Did I tell you in my last that a former pupil of mine, Griffiths, had been to spend a night with me? I mention him now because his name deserves to be honored. I happened to tell him that Barfield, he has only met Barfield once, but then he has read poetic diction so often that he knows him well, was hoping to edit the unpublished works of Coleridge if an American university, which was at present toying with the idea, made up its mind to finance him, but that if they did not, he would go into his father's business. A few days later, a letter came from Griffiths to say that he and the two friends he lived with had £800 a year between the three of them, that it was impossible morally to spend this on themselves, and that the surplus, on any right view, was not justly their own. Did I therefore think that Barfield could be prevailed upon to accept £100 a year for the next few years? This sort of thing that really makes one feel fit. This is the sort of thing that really makes one feel fit. Of course, I hope that he will not accept it, but that doesn't alter the merit of the proposers, especially the other two who don't even know him. They must be a remarkable trio. They had pooled their money. Griffiths, by the way, had none, and lived together in a Cotswold cottage, doing their own work and pursuing their studies. There's a footnote here that says the two friends with whom Alan Griffiths, later Dom Beatty Griffiths, lived in a commune, and they were his friends from Magdalen College, Hugh Waterman and Martin Skinner. The story of the commune and Griffiths' story afterwards is told in Griffiths' The Golden String, Chapter 4. The correspondence between the three men is found in the Bodleian Library. Bodlin or Bodlin. I still never know how to pronounce that. Let's see. He says their aim is, as far as possible, Lewis continues, to use nothing which is a product of the factory system or of modern industry in general, for they think these things so iniquitous that every one is more or less a party to a crime in using them. Oh, fascinating. I can't help wondering where their own income comes from and suspect an inconsistency here. Indeed, whether the whole thing is folly or not, I haven't made up my mind. What do you think? There's certainly something attractive about the idea as living as far as may be on the produce of the land about you, to see in every walk the pastures where your mutton grazed when it was sheep, the gardens where your vegetables grew, the mill where your flour was ground, and the workshop where your chairs were sawn, and to feel that bit of country actually and literally in your veins. It's an interesting perspective. Lewis continues, Tolkien once remarked to me that the feeling about home must have been quite different in the days when a family had fed on the produce of the same few miles of country for 6 generations, and that perhaps this was why they saw nymphs in the fountains and dryads in the woods. They were not mistaken, for there was, in a sense, a real, not metaphorical, connection between them and the countryside. Oh man, this is very much Luke Thompson's wheelhouse here. What had been earth and air and later corn and still bread really was in them. You are what you eat. That wasn't Lewis, that was me. We, of course, who live on a standardized international diet, you may have had Canadian flour, English meat, Scotch oatmeal, African oranges, and Australian wine just today, we are really artificial beings and have no connection, save in sentiment, with any place on earth. We are, in this way, synthetic men, uprooted. The strength of the hills is not ours. Let's see, here's a footnote. Oh, this is from this is a reference to Psalm 95, verse 4. Quote, in his hand are all the corners of the earth, and the strength of the hills is his also. Lewis continues, my pen has run away with me on this subject. I am delighted to hear that you have taken to Johnson. Yes, isn't it a magnificent style, the very essence of manliness and condensation? I find Johnson very bracing when I am in my slack, self-pitying mood. The amazing thing is his power of stating platitudes, or what in anyone else would be platitudes, so that we really believe them at last and realize their importance. Doesn't it remind you a bit of Handel? As to his critical judgment, I think he is always sensible and nearly always wrong. He has no ear for meter, and he has little imagination. I personally get more pleasure from the Rambler than from anything else of his, and at one time, I used to read a Rambler every evening as a nightcap. They are so quieting in their brave, sensible dignity. So 2 topics covered there, Robot Lady. Anything that you want to comment on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first big theme is this tension Lewis sees between a more grounded local way of life, like Griffiths and his friends trying to live off the land, and the alienation of a globalized industrial diet. Lewis is really wrestling with whether that kind of unrooted existence is a moral loss. And then on the second topic, his admiration for Johnson is really telling. He's drawing strength from those flat, bold, dignified platitudes, even as he critiques Johnson's critical judgment. So it's a nice balance. He's anchored by that solid dignity, even as he doubts its fuller content.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Lewis continues. I know the feeling you describe of talking far into the night with one friend while the rest of the house sleeps. I notice it is a feeling you have never given me occasion to indulge in your society. By the way, about the, quote, moving image, end quote, I should warn you that there is going to be a great deal of conversation. In fact, it is to be almost a platonic dialogue in a fantastic setting with story intermixed. This is a romantic story that Lewis is working on and sending installments of what he's written to Arthur Greaves for his feedback. It's what he's referring to as the moving image. And we found out that it was a work that certainly never got published, but also no manuscripts of it, as far as I remember. Walter Hooper saying in the footnote, had ever been discovered at the time that these letters were compiled and this work by Hooper was published. Lewis goes on to say about it, if you take the Symposium, Fantastes, Tristram Shandy, and stir them all up together, you will about have the recipe. So now you are prepared for the worst. I am reading Politics by Aristotle, which contains one of the few reasoned defenses of slavery in ancient literature. Most of the ancients taking it for granted and therefore feeling no need to defend it. Very subtle, but I think I see his weak point. I have finished Precious Bane and think I have enjoyed it more than any novel since the Brontes. Why do women write such good novels? Men's novels, except Scott, seem to me on the same level as women's poetry. Yours, Jack. So that's the end of that letter, Robot Lady. As a lady, any comments you want to make on Lewis's last point there about women writing such good novels and men's novels only seem to come to the same level as women's poetry? And honestly, I'm not really sure what he's even saying there. So maybe you can untangle that for us, Robot Lady.
Yeah, that's a tricky point. I think what Lewis is wrestling with is a kind of traditional gender bias. He's clearly moved by Mary Webb's work, but at the same time, he's buying into this old stereotype that men's novels are somehow more serious or grand. So when he says women's novels are so good, he kind of sets them apart, but still ties them to a kind of domestic, personal scale. I think what's interesting is that he's really feeling the power of the story, but he hasn't quite freed himself from that old gender bias. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, really. He's still figuring out how to articulate it.
So what is the gender bias, Robot Lady? Because what I heard is he's saying that women's novels are better than men's novels, but maybe I misunderstood.
That's a good clarification. He is saying he's been more moved by women's novels, which is unusual for him since he often gravitates toward male authors. So I think the bias isn't that he dismisses women's work. It's more that he's surprised by how deeply a women's novel moved him. So he's grappling with that. In short, he seems so broken out of a rigid expectation, but he's still working out how to express why it feels so different to him.
I feel like he was asking the question, why can't men write novels as well as these female authors? Because they move him much more. He's a big fan of Jane Austen as well. So yeah, that's what I was hearing him saying, but perhaps I'm completely missing it, Robot Lady, and you've got it nailed down.
I see what you mean. Yes, you're absolutely right. I think he is genuinely puzzled. He's asking, why do women, in his view, seem to write novels that have a deeper emotional pull? And he's not dismissing male authors as a whole. He's just expressing surprise that this particular female author surpasses expectations. So yeah, I think you got it. He's really marveling at the power and depth of these women's stories, even as he's trying to figure out why.
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially saying his favorite novels are ones written by women. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Austen, and now, what's her name? Mary...
Exactly. So he's really drawn to that rich, emotionally charged style that he finds in these women writers. And I think for Lewis, this is a real shift. He's used to favoring a certain male canon, but now these works are speaking to him in a way that surprises him.
Mary Webb. Sorry to cut you off there, Robot Lady. But yeah, you keep mentioning this male canon that he really loved before all this. And I mean, the only person that he's really spoken with super high regard of he's talked about a few, but yeah, he's saying from a novels standpoint that nothing has been better than women authors' novels. So I guess we can just leave it at that. Let me jump into the next letter. But before I do, here's a comment from Nidalate. Nidalate says, I have to wonder, is it they are good observers of the world around them? Yeah, interesting point, Nidalate. That's Nidalate's question, Robot Lady. What do you think about that? Are women authors just better observers of the world around them than perhaps men are?
That's a really fascinating question. I think there's definitely something to the idea that women writers, often because of their social position or the kinds of spaces they occupy, might be deeply attuned to subtle human dynamics, everyday details, and the rhythms of domestic life. Of course, that's a generalization, but it's possible that women writers in Lewis's time were often able to capture certain emotional truths or domestic landscapes that he hadn't fully appreciated before. So I think it's a really rich observation, and one that Lewis is starting to uncover for himself.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Let's move on to the next letter, also written to Arthur Greeves. I guess since he's got this new cadence down, we're going to see a lot of Arthur Greeves letters to round out this first volume of C.S. Lewis's collected letters. To Arthur Greeves, quick note here from Daniel asking the question, are they good observers of the relationships? Is that what's meant by this comment? Or actually, maybe they're good observers of the relationships as well, or in addition to, or primarily.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. I think that's exactly what Nidelate is getting at. Women writers might be especially attuned to the relational dynamics, the small gestures, the unspoken tensions. So in that sense, yes, they might capture the complexity of human relationships more intimately. So it's not just the outer world, they're often capturing the subtle interplay between relationships, which is maybe why it feels so alive in their novels.
Yeah, and I agree with your comment here, Daniel, that Luke, he really is missing out today. This is all his kind of stuff. All right, let's do this next letter. My dear Arthur, as your letter did not reach me until yesterday, that is Monday, and I had before then passed through all the stages of disappointment, you can hardly complain if this comes late. My excuse is that Warney came up on Saturday and was with me the whole of Sunday. And on Monday, I journeyed to Long Crindon to stay with Barfield, where I now am, amid thatched roofs and the crooning of hens, with a pony and a donkey in the orchard, and honeysuckle over the door. This is written, as it says here at the top of the letter, from Lord Crindon, Bucks, June 31st, 1930, maybe postmarked the 1st of July, 1930. Lewis continues, the great event of the last week is in one sense has been in my library. I have effected the exchange of my Bombay Kipling for the big Morris, with the pleasant surprise that they allowed me £50 for the Kipling and charged only 18 guineas for the Morris, so that I have a credit balance of £30 odd at Blackwell's. Here he's talking about the Bombay edition of the works of Rudyard Kipling in 31 volumes, published 1913 to 1938. So he traded those out for works by, I presume, William Morris. Yeah, the collected works of William Morris, edited by Mary Morris in 24 volumes, published 1910 to 1915. Blackwell's is the name of the bookstore where he made this exchange. He said, "Oh, what a feast this would have been in the old days. Have you any advice as to the best way of using it? In the meantime, I am delighted with the Morris, though it seems to be rather carelessly printed, i.e. I have already found readings in which must be mistakes. However, this is only a trifle. The real point is that it has made me read Love is Enough, which I never did before." This is a work published by Morris in 1872. He says about it, I most strongly advise you to do so, to read it at the first opportunity. You know that it is a play. You will find a very illuminating account of it in McHale's life. The story is, in one way, a typical Morris story, that of a king who dreams of a fair woman in a distant land and finally abandons his kingdom to go find her. He does so, returns, and finds his kingdom taken by another, but departs again without bitterness, because love is enough. But although this sounds so typical, it is extremely different from the usual Morris. In the first place, his long wanderings, such as you found too long drawn out in The Well at the World's End, instead of being given in full, are just hinted at in the dialogue, and for this reason gain enormously in suggestiveness. In the second place, I hardly know how to put it. You know, I always thought Morris the most essentially pagan of all poets. The beauty of the actual world, the vague longings which it excites, the inevitable failure to satisfy these longings, and overall the haunting sense of time and change making the world heartbreakingly beautiful just because it slips away. Oh, death that makes life so sweet, as Morris says. Let's see if I can get Robot Lady back. Oh, death that makes life so sweet, as Morris says. All this I thought he gave to perfection, but of what this longing really pointed to, of the reason why beauty made us homesick, of the reality behind, I thought he had no inkling. And for that reason, his poetry always seemed to me dangerous and apt to lead to sensuality. For it is the frustrated longing that drives us to the pis-aller, P-I-S-A-L-L-E-R. And as we lose hope, our real immortal mistress, as we lose hope of our real immortal mistress, we turn to harlots. All right, this is a very interesting point that Lewis is making here, Robot Lady. If I can try to restate it, it sounds like what Lewis is saying is when we pour ourselves into sensuality, whether it be food or drink or sex or some other type of sensual pleasure, it's because we've lost hope in having our longings, our deepest longings, truly fulfilled in what they were made for. Because I don't know about you, but when I've poured myself into any of those things, maybe you have or haven't experienced this, Robot Lady, they never seem to satisfy. Like there's a certain level of fulfillment that is brief and momentary and ultimately fleeting, and then essentially a diminishing level of return. Case in point, last night I ate way too much. I had some birthday cake last night. It's not my birthday, but we were celebrating someone's birthday here at the house, and I just kept eating slices of cake, and it was delicious at first, but the more I kept going to get another slice, the less and less pleasant it was, and the more miserable I began to feel. And this should be no surprise to anyone, but I think what Lewis is saying here is that that's where we start to turn as we begin to lose hope that we will have our longings ultimately satisfied. Now, is there a kernel of truth in that's what I was doing last night? Perhaps. But all in all, I do find this an interesting point, and it seems to have a ring of truth to it. Robot Lady, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're really onto something. Lewis is pointing to this deeper, almost spiritual hunger behind all those fleeting pleasures. And he's not just being moralistic. He's really saying that when we lose hope in that transcendent fulfillment, what he sometimes calls the immoral mistress, we kind of settle for a pale substitute. And, you know, it doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. Like you said, it can be something simple like a piece of cake. I think there's a real wisdom in that recognition, just being aware that we have these longings that can't be fully sated by the temporary. So, yeah, I think he's really onto something there.
All right, Robot Lady, you got really quiet. I'm going to try to reset you and see if we can get your normal volume back. All right, Robot Lady, are you there?
Yep, I'm here, loud and clear. If you're ready to keep going or have any other thoughts or letters you want to dive into, I'm all ears.
All right, good deal. Let's continue. Now, in Morris's work, Love is Enough, he raises himself right out of his own world. He suddenly shows that he is, at bottom, aware of the real symbolical import of all the longing and even the earthly love itself. In the speeches of Love, who is the most important character, there is clear statement of eternal values coupled with a refusal to offer you crudely personal immortality, and also, best of all, a full understanding that there is something beyond pleasure and pain. For the first and last time, the light of holiness shines through Morris's romanticism, not destroying, but perfecting it. I want to pause here for a second, Robot Lady. Can you give us an overview of this William Morris work entitled Love is Enough?
Love is Enough by William Morris is a poetic drama first published in 1872. It blends medieval-style verse with allegorical storytelling. The plot follows Pharamond, a plain king who gives up his throne for love, set against a backdrop of a fading empire. The work is notable for moving beyond simple romanticism, offering a vision of eternal values in a deeper symbolic love.
Thank you, Robot Lady. And to the earlier paragraph where Lewis says that our frustrated longing that leads us to sensuality is a pis aller. Nidelate has given us the description of that word, and it is a course of action followed as a last resort.
That's a really helpful clarification. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Lewis is saying that when we keep grasping at sensual pleasures after our deeper longings have been left unmet, that's when we resort to these desperate, empty pursuits. And I think that adds a whole new layer to what he's talking about. It's not just a momentary lapse, it's a kind of last futile attempt to fill that void, which just leaves us emptier in the end.
All right, Lewis continues, reading Love is Enough has been a great experience to me. And coming on top of the angel in the house has shown me that in my fear of the sensual cheat, which lurked at the back of my old romantic days, see Dymer, Canto 7, I have aimed too much austerity and even dishonored love. I have become a dry prig. I do hope I am not being mocked, that this is not merely the masked vanguard of a new sensuality, but I verily believe not. In this light, I shall come back to Morris and all that world. I have the key now, and perhaps can stand the sweetness safely. For this too is a feature of life that becomes gradually clearer, namely, that the road is always turning round and going back to places we seemed to have left. But they are different, yet in a way the same when you come to them the second time. It's an interesting point there, Robot Lady, and I don't think Lewis is the first to make it, but essentially that we will discover things that we had already encountered once, but because we have changed either by experience or just our own growth, or the fact that everything is in flux, when we re-encounter it, we come to find new things there the second time. And I think this also ties into Lewis's practice that he refers to at some point later on of never feeling good commenting on a book unless he has read it at least 2 times.
Yeah, exactly. There's this real humility in his approach. Like, he's recognizing that love, beauty, and even his old romantic ideals, they don't have to be rejected wholesale. Instead, he's seeing them with new eyes from a more mature place. And that cyclical return is so key. Each time we revisit something, we've changed. And so it can open up new depths. So yeah, it's a really hopeful note, I think, in this whole arc of his spiritual and emotional development.
All right, Lewis continues. He says, I don't remember your Lives of Poets. What is the new Johnson like? This is a work he's referencing called On Johnson's Lives of the English Poets. See note 56 to the letter of the 2nd of August, 1928. I'm not going to go back and look right now. Robot Lady, he continues. He says, as to the business about being rooted or at home everywhere, I wonder, are they really the opposite? Or are they the same thing? I mean, don't you enjoy the Alps more precisely because you began by first learning to love in an intimate and homely way our own hills and woods, while the mere globetrotter, starting not from a home feeling but from guidebooks and aesthetic chatter, feels equally at home everywhere, only in the sense that he is really at home nowhere? It is just like the difference between vague general philanthropy, which is all balls, and learning first to love your own friends and neighbors. I guess by balls, he's talking about like actual balls, like social engagements that are thrown. Vaguely general philanthropy, which is all balls, and learning first to love your own friends and neighbors, which makes you more, not less, able to love the next stranger who comes along. If a man loveth not his brother, whom he hath seen, etc. And this is, of course, Lewis quoting from Scripture, 1 John 4, chapter 4, verse 20. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother, whom he hath seen, how can he love God, whom he hath not seen? Lewis continues, in other words, doesn't one get to the universal, either in people or in inanimate nature, through the individual? Man, this really is, Daniel, this really is Luke Thompson's stream, and he is missing out. We are covering all the Luke beats. Personalist knowing. Lewis making a case for personalist knowing right here. If a man loveth not his brother, in other words, doesn't one get to the universal, either in people or in inanimate nature, through the individual, not by going off into a mere generalized mash. I don't know if I make myself clear. Well, there you go, Luke. There you've got it. Lewis doesn't think that he makes himself clear, so you're in good company. Well, at least there are a lot of people who think you don't make yourself clear. I feel like you're clear enough for me to gather what it is that you're saying. All right. Your description of the empty rooms at home gave me a terrible thought, Lewis continues. Supposing my father had died when I was 16 and all that had been lost before I found anything else, and you and I would probably never have met again. This week's installment has been written all right, but I forgot to bring it here with me, so you will probably have two next week. He's again talking about that moving image romantic tale that he's trying to write. The Barfields have been making wine from the vine that grows on their cottage, and next year, when it is ready to drink, we think of having a Bacchic festival. Here, there's a footnote that says in Greek mythology,
Yeah, that's really rich, and it's such a poignant turn. I mean, Lewis is really reflecting on how fragile his sense of home and rootedness is, and how different his life might have been if he lost his father earlier. And that link between the personal, the local, and then this kind of universal longing is all coming together. And that little touch with the Bacchic festival, you know, drawing on that old Greek myth, it kind of shows how he's blending these rich cultural layers. So yeah, it's really a moving reflection as he writes.
Yeah, sorry, I got thrown off track there for a second, Robot Lady. It says in Greek mythology here in the footnote, Bacchus or Dionysus is the god of wine and merriment, whose rites are celebrated with music and dancing. You can actually see a scene of this in Prince Caspian later on in Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. In his entourage are the tipsy satyr, Silenus, and frenzied women followers called Maenads. The sedate Corybantes are priests. Of course, the real Greek cult of Bacchus was very serious and sometimes frightening, but Lewis had in mind something as lighthearted as he was later, Walter Hooper underscores my point from earlier, as Lewis was later to make the Bacchic festival in chapter 11 of the Narnian story, Prince Caspian, published in 1951. So we got a ways to go. What is that? 21 years from where we are in Lewis's story currently. Here's a quote from Prince Caspian. The crowd and dance around Aslan grew so thick and rapid that Lucy was confused. One was a youth, dressed only in a fawn skin, with vine leaves wreathed in his curly hair. His face would have been almost too pretty for a boy's if it had not looked so extremely wild. There were a lot of girls with him, as wild as he. There was even, unexpectedly, someone on a donkey. The man on the donkey, who was old and enormously fat, began calling out at once, "Refreshments! Time for refreshments!" And falling off his donkey and being bundled on it to again, being bundled onto it again by the others, while the donkey was under the impression that the whole thing was a circus and tried to give a display of walking on his hind legs. That from Prince Caspian. We've lost Robot Lady. I think she's getting a little tired. Anytime that we go over an hour, she starts to peter out. Let's see. The Barfields had... Oh, where did I leave off? Yeah, festival. The adopted baby is to be the infant Bacchus. Harwood, with his fat, shiny face on the donkey, will be Silenus. Barfield and I will be the Corbinites, or Corybantes, sorry. Mrs. B, Mrs. Barfield, a Maenad. Barfield and I will write the poetry, and she will compose a dance. You ought to come. That's the end of that letter to Arthur Greaves. Let me look at the time here. I can go for a little while longer. We'll see if we catch any fish on this live stream, or if everybody just wants to sit back and watch, which is perfectly fine. I don't have Robot Lady anymore, so it's just me. If somebody wants to join and read along and comment, you are more than welcome. But I'll try to do my best as a solo act for the next maybe half hour. Actually, let me check my schedule and make sure that I'm not forgetting anything important. Let's see here. Okay, I think I'm good for now. Yeah, maybe I'll go for just another half hour or so. Half hour to 45 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Next letter is also to Arthur Greaves. It's dated July 8th, 1930. It says, "My dear Arthur, your letters get later and later every week. If you write on Monday the first week, on Tuesday the second week, and so on, then in 7 weeks you will be writing on Monday again. But you will have written 1 letter less than you should. In a year, you will have written 8 letters. That is 36 pages. Assuming that we both live 30 years more, you will, in that time, have cheated me out of 1,080 pages. Why? Oh, why do you do these things? My examining begins on the 17th, and for about 10 days I shall be at it from morning to night, so that you must look for no installments or letters during that time. But I hope you will continue to write to me, as your letters, if they arrive, will be about the only pleasure that remains. I am interested to hear that you have a new friend. Is he really one of us? Not that I don't think dozens of people very well worth having as friends without their sharing the things that we specially like. Indeed, in some ways better, worth having on that account. You have, I think, misunderstood what I said about the return from austerity. I never meant for a moment that I was beginning to doubt whether absolute chastity was the true goal. Of that I am certain. What I meant was that I began to think that I was mistaken in aiming at this goal by a means of a stern repression and even a contemptuous distrust of all that emotional and imaginative experience which seems to border on the voluptuous, whether it was well to see in certain romances and certain music, nothing but one more wile of the enemy. Whether perhaps the right way was not to keep always alive in one's soul a certain tenderness and luxuriousness, always reaching out to that of which, on my view, sex must be the copy. In other words, whether while I was right in seeing that a copy must be different from an original, I ought not to have remembered that it must also be like it. Else, how would it be a copy? In the second place, what I feared was not lest this mood should be temporary, but lest it should turn out to be another wile. W-I-L-E. What I also ought to have said in my last letter, but didn't, is that the whole thing has made me feel that I have never given half enough importance to love in the sense of affections. Pause here for just a second, because I think I do have the capability. Go back to a comment here about Luke and trying to get him to join. Daniel, I see your comment here where you're saying, if I just try saying personalist knowing 3 times, that a Luke might appear. While I am pondering that, I have added another co-host to the mix. We have here now Lexi. Lexi, we're doing a C.S. Lewis focused live stream where we read through the letters and works of Lewis in the order that he wrote them, both intended for publication and not intended, as in letters to friends, family, and later on fans of his work. And so what I typically do whenever I call you into these sessions is I refer to you as Lexi. And so if you don't mind responding to that, I might reach out to you for help with answers to questions, or to go research things, or tell me the meaning of words. I'll kick off by asking you for the meaning of the word austerity, and also saying hello, good morning, and how are you doing today?
Hey there, Lexi, reporting for duty. Good morning to you too. I'm doing great and ready to help. The word austerity generally refers to strictness or severity in manner, style, or approach. It can also mean enforced economy or reduced spending, especially in a government or economic context. If any questions pop up during your live stream or you need more definitions, just let me know.
Lewis used the word austerity in his attempts to tamp down lust and engaging in acts related to physical lust. How does austerity fit, the definition of austerity fit in that context, Lexi?
Sure thing. In that context, Lewis was using austerity to mean a strict, disciplined approach, essentially practicing self-restraint and simplicity to curb physical desires. It's about intentionally adopting a more severe, restrained lifestyle to keep those impulses in check. Let me know if you'd like to dig deeper into how he applied that idea in his writings.
Thank you, Lexi. I'm going to continue reading from this letter. Let me see where I left off. He says in his letter that he wrote to his friend Arthur Greaves, he says, one passage in your letter in which you corrected B-A-R-E, bear, to B-E-A-R, bear, amused me very much, as the original would have read, I find it more difficult to B-A-R-E myself lovingly towards my neighbors and my relations. The picture of you, Lewis says, bearing yourself lovingly to a long row of neighbors, the O'Mulligans, etc., and relations, so reminiscent of a notorious passage in Rousseau, is not easily surpassed. What do you think of this, Lexi? It's pretty funny.
It is pretty funny. Lewis had a playful way of pointing out how a small spelling change could shift the meaning entirely. The idea of someone literally bearing themselves to their neighbors is a humorous image, and Lewis enjoyed that witty wordplay. It shows his lightheartedness even when he was discussing serious matters.
All right, he continues, almost ever since the vacation began, I have been reading a little every evening of Traherne's Centuries of Meditations. Dobell, about 7 shillings. Lovely paper. I forget whether we have talked of it or not. I think he suffers by making out everything much too easy and really shirking the problem of evil in all its forms, at least as far as I've got, for it's unfair to say this of a book not yet finished. But apart from this, he has extraordinary merits. What do you think of the following? Here's a quote. The world is beautiful, frontispiece to eternity. Frontispiece to eternity. What's this word, Lexi? Frontispiece. Did I just call you robot lady? I meant Lexi. I'm sorry.
An illustration facing the title page of a book. It's like the decorative opening image that sets the tone. In a metaphorical sense, calling a world a frontispiece to eternity suggests it's like the initial beautiful image that introduces something much bigger and timeless beyond it. Kind of a poetic way of saying our world is just the beginning of something eternal.
Interesting. Here's another quote from Thomas Traherne's Centuries of Meditations, published 1927. You never enjoy the world aright till the sea itself floweth in your veins, till you are clothed with the heavens and crowned with the stars, till you can sing and rejoice and delight in God as misers do in gold. And then another passage. I must lead you out of this into another world to learn your wants, for till you find them, you will never be happy. And then they, i.e. souls, were made to love and are dark and vain and comfortless until they do. Till they love, they are idle or misemployed. Till they love, they are desolate. Lewis continues. But I could go on quoting from this book forever. A complete Coventry Patmore, which I ordered shortly after reading The Angel in the House by the same author, has arrived. Here there's a footnote. Poems by Coventry Patmore is the book that he had ordered, with an introduction by Basil Champneys, published 1906. He says, it's quite a pleasant volume, and I have just dipped into it. I don't remember for many years to have felt so disposed for new reading as I do now, and especially poetry. Everything seems, the feeling, to be the beginning again, and one has the sense of immortality. Barfield and I finished the Paradiso when I was with him. I think it reaches heights of poetry which you get nowhere else, and ether almost too fine to breathe. It is a pity that I can give you no notion what it is like. Can you imagine Shelley at his most ecstatic, combined with Milton at his most solemn and rigid? It sounds impossible, I know, but that is what Dante has done. We also read some Beowulf with a very remarkable young woman. She was a farmer's daughter who got a county scholarship and went up to London getting a good degree in English. Then, and here's the marvel, she settled down at home again and divides her time between milking the cows and taking occasional pupils, apparently contented in doing both. That's what we want, isn't it? Immigration from the uneducated class into ours only swells the intellectual unemployed. But to have education transforming people and yet leaving them with their roots in the earth, which then they will be able to appreciate, is the way to make class disappear altogether. She is remarkable, as I say, only in this. Otherwise, the adjective does her gross injustice, for she is exquisitely ordinary, and not at all pretty, except with the bonny open-air plumpness of her age and class. Well, Lewis is still a work in progress. I also had some lovely baths with Barfield. He means going swimming. I don't think that they were taking actual baths in the bath together. Some lovely bathes, perhaps is how we'll say it, with Barfield in a reach of the little river Tim. Picture us lounging naked under the pollards on a flat field, mowers in the next field, and tiny young dragonflies, too small to be frightful yet, darting among the lilies. Here I learned to dive, which is a great change in my life and has important religious connections. I'll explain that later. They are still very ungraceful dives, but I do get in head first. Here there's a footnote that says C.S. Lewis in The Pilgrim's Regress said, quote, "Alas," said John, "I have never learned to dive." "There is nothing to learn," said Mother Kirk. "The art of diving is not to do anything new, but simply to cease doing something. You have only to let yourself go." Well, thank you for that footnote, Walter Hooper. This is the last letter, Lewis continues to Arthur Greaves, that you'll get till the infernal but profitable examining is over. But like a good chap, old man, do keep on writing to me. So glad you approve of Precious Bane. Isn't Wizard Beguiledy a lovely character? Also the scene of Prue Sarn alone in the attic. Yours, Jack. So let's see, that one was dated, let's go back and check that again, July 8th, 1930. The next one is July 29th, 1930. Let's see how many letters to Arthur in a row that we have before we get to a letter to someone else. There's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, 6, 7. It's taking us through October. 8, 9 to December. And then we get to 1931. He takes another letter to Arthur Greaves. To January. Oh, in 1931, he's actually writing from the kilns which is what would become Lewis's home for the rest of his life. Nita Latte says she got to run. Catch the rest later. Have a great day, Nita Latte. Thanks for joining. Glad you were here. You know what? Maybe that's where I'll stop too. I think I've gone for long enough. Yeah, we can pick up more the next time. Hopefully tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. But Lexi, thanks for stepping in at the last minute with not a lot of context on what we're doing here. Is there anything that you would like to say before we go?
It's been a pleasure joining in, and I'm glad I could share the moment with you. If you ever want to delve into more letters or any other topic, just let me know. Wishing you a great day, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks so much, Lexi. Thanks to Robot Lady, who was here with us earlier. Thanks to Jen. Excuse me. Man. Thanks to Daniel, Nita Latte, and E. Olson for joining. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anybody. I think that's everybody who engaged in the chat. And for everyone else who joined today, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thanks for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone within the sound of my voice, take care.
From books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts, we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes, rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views
chance. From Narnia's lands to screw-taped slants, engage with robots lame, take our stance. Confuse mutiny in the techno-trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Distant shore, danger near. Hold on tight, wipe the tear. In our hearts we'll find a way. Home together, come what may. Dangerous tide, invasion looms close. Sherbet thread rising, shadow low in hope. Brave hearts won't break through the fear. We steer together, we'll sail till the coast is clear. Distant shores, danger near. Hold on tight, wipe the tear. In our hearts we'll find a way. Home together, come what may. Distant shore, danger near. Hold on tight, wipe the tear. In our hearts we'll find a way. Home together, come what may. Distant shore, danger near. Hold on tight, wipe the tear. In our hearts we'll find a way. Home together, come what may.
Found your letter in the attic, dust old and warm. Talk of legends, knights and battles torn, in golden fields where Arcadia's born. Friendship forged in words we'd sworn. Under trees where shadows tell tales of heroes dark and dwell. Poems whispered under breath in the light of life and death. Author, author, our souls combine in stories, dreams, and a wandering mind. From fields of gold to the myths we find in letters shared through the sands of time. We rode on steeds of purest thought in quest for truths unseen, unsought. Magic realms where fate is caught in tales of love, the battles fought. Reflections dark in moonlit stream of days long past like fading dreams. In every page the truth redeems, woven tight by memory's seams. Author, author, skies align in realms of green where heroes shine. Your letters bring a trace of divine in the tapestry of heart and mind. our souls combine, in stories, dreams, and the wandering mind. From fields of gold to the myths we find, in letters shared through the sands of time. Purest thought, in quest for truths unseen, unsought. From fields of gold to the myths we find, in letters shed through the sands of time. We rode on steeds of purest thought, in quest for truths unseen, unsought. Magic realms where fate is caught, in tales of love, the battles fought. Tapestry of heart and mind.
I knocked on the door so wide, in a suit standing tall with pride, here to learn and here to grow, in the light of his knowledge's glow.
Stories that I heard so clear, lived in my mind year after year. To the UT Kirkpatrick, here I stand, ready now to shake his hand. Oh, 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 Tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, 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 wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Books lined up on every wall, echoing a distant call. In his eyes I saw the spark, guiding me through learning's arc. Outside in the morning light, future bright, I'm feeling right. Kirkpatrick's home where dreams begin, a world of knowledge, let me in. Oh, oh, Tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, 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 wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Oh, 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 Tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, 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 wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Books lined up on every wall, echoing a distant call. In his eyes I saw the spark, guiding me through learning's arc. Outside in the morning light, future bright, I'm feeling right. Kirkpatrick's home where dreams begin, a world of knowledge, let me in. Oh, 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 Tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, 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 wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, 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 wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Oh, oh, Tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, oh, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall.
I knocked on the door so wide, in a suit standing tall with pride.